Any last minute questions from the panelists and keynotes? No. All right, good.
So, hello and welcome to all who are joining now. We'll wait for a couple more minutes to give everyone the chance to join and be there from the beginning, and get yourself comfortable, grab a cup of tea, and see you in a couple of minutes. All right, once again, welcome everyone. We're just waiting for the last few attendees to join, and we'll get the whole session going in just a few minutes. All right, so 5 minutes past the starting time, and I think it's time for us to get going. Get this session and second panel within the SG Germany Cyber Edition underway. So first of all, welcome everyone from wherever you're joining. We will shortly find out where you're all from. Welcome to this panel, and officially also welcome to the this time around third SG Germany virtual activity that we're hosting throughout November. So we originally had planned to host the SG Germany in Munich back in March, but then this whole pandemic situation happened and we could just not do it. We tried to get it all sorted and postponed to November, but as you know, things didn't really go as planned and didn't get better that much, so that we could indeed host the event in person again. So we switched online to give anyone interested in the idea behind SG Germany as much possibilities to get in touch with us, experience what we had in mind and what we're up to, which is mostly these two panels that we're hosting, the second one today. And we will host sessions, coffee hours over the coming weeks, and hope that we will be able to host the in-person event next year, sometime early summer. So before diving into the topic and everything, we just want to introduce you also to SGAC. For those of you who don't know where we are, who we are and what SGAC means, so we're the Space Generation Advisory Council, and we are an international non-governmental and non-profit organization network representing university students, young space professionals, to various groups, the United Nations, space agencies, industry, academia throughout the world. We were established in 1999, so we celebrated 20 years just last year. And we have, as of today, just shy of 20,000 members worldwide, which is really fantastic and makes us one of the biggest young professional networks there are, and definitely the biggest one in space. So we are the voice of students and young professionals and also our alumni in the world space industry. So we employ the creativity and vigor of youth for the advancement of humanity through the peaceful uses of space, which sounds very like political and very on top of things, but it all comes down to us being a big group of young people all into space, interested in meeting each other, networking. So most of what we do is outreach work. So we host events all over the world, small events, big events. We bring people together. We help young professionals and students grow their network within space, and also bring a lot of fun and interesting topics to more or less everyone who's interested. And as you can see from the pictures, we have quite a lot of members and things going on, and we meet cool things like crazy astronauts and Mars and Moon rovers. So if you haven't registered yet, please do so. Our network is open for anyone ages 18 to 35, and it will be fun. So join if you haven't, and let's move on. So for today, you have two hosts, one being Luisa and the other one being me. And we will lead you through the afternoon and early evening, explain the panel topics, introduce you to all the panelists and keynotes, and see where it leads us. And behind the scenes, we are a total of 9 young professionals from the area of Munich, but with multinational backgrounds from Portugal, Spain, France, and also, of course, Germany, who have worked relentlessly over the last let's say almost a year and a bit more than a year to make this event happen. And now the virtual activities happen, and hopefully also we will all stick around next year to finally host the in-person event and give all of you the experience we originally intended to. Okay. So the overall theme for SG Germany and for this second panel is this preparing and transforming the German space ecosystem in Germany by 2030, focusing on innovation, entrepreneurship, and funding. And the goals we have for this panel, but also for the one we hosted last Sunday, is to foster an exchange and discussion of ideas, which will feed into the event next year. So we will compose kind of a white paper or a report where we will add in all the recommendations, all the feedback, all the ideas we gathered from these discussions, and try to use them to make the next year's event better and bigger and more interesting, to like really build up on what we have done this November so that it will not be lost. And of course, having a good time and engage with all of you and the panelists is our utmost goal. So as I already mentioned, we will host a series of coffee hours and smaller events throughout the rest of November. So you can see a rough schedule over here, and you will find the registration to all of these coffee hours and the fireside chat and everything that will come on the SGAC Eventbrite, where you also registered for this panel. So take a look, see what might be of interest to you, and register if you haven't done so. It is open to anyone, and we hope to see as many of you there. All of this would, of course, not be possible without our sponsors. So we have put all of them here, and we really are grateful and thankful for all of their support throughout the whole year, more or less. Since we tried to organize an event in March and weren't able to and had to postpone, and more or less had to postpone now again. And they're still supportive, and they're still on board and engaged with all of the ideas we have with SG Germany. So we're really thankful for all of their continuous support in these challenging times, and we'll certainly make sure to show them wherever we can. Just some basic logistics for all of you to know. So we are using this webinar function Zoom offers. So please ask all of your questions in the Q&A session or settings. We will have 2 people in the background to monitor the Q&A. So every question will get forwarded to us as well. And just a heads up, this session is being recorded and is also live streamed to YouTube. So you will be able to also see the YouTube stream afterwards. So it will be saved there for more or less ever. And the recording might be used by some of our members and speakers for their use. Now it's time for me to stop talking and to get all of you involved. So we have a Mentimeter set up, where you can just go to menti.com and use this code 7897113 to give us the first idea of from where you're signing in and joining. And I'll switch over to that one as well. And then let's see what we see. Okay, so the bubble is growing. Enter countries, cities. Of course, Munich and Germany are quite big, so that was to be expected. So it's very German centered. Right, that's a good one. That's definitely positive. Okay, we'll just give you a couple more seconds and then we'll close this one and continue the panel. All right, so it seems like most of you are from Germany, Munich in particular, and also a bit of France. Oh, and now we see the US, so hello and more or less good morning, depending on where you are. And some more fancy cities and countries coming in now. That's good. Mars is also fun. How's the internet connection over there? Hope it's good. All right, that's pretty cool. So we have a nice overview of Philippines. Well, yeah, it's kind of late over there. So hello to you and thanks for joining. Yep, very creative. Okay, so thank you very much. And we'll go back to the panel. Okay, so I think that was a good first introduction to get to know who's joining. And we have quite a few participants already, so that's pretty cool. And now let's get into details, and I'll hand over to Louisa.
All right, so good afternoon from my side. And welcome to all of those who are connecting from the Milky Way galaxy and from Earth and from the Philippines. So it's a pleasure to have you here. And before we start with the keynotes, let's take a moment and think about what the status of the space ecosystem is. So we know that the international space context is changing quite fast, and global competition is increasing with new entrants bringing new ambitions into space, and space activities are becoming increasingly commercial and with greater private sector involvement. Now, major technological shifts such as digitalisation, miniaturisation, mass production, artificial intelligence, or even reusable launchers are disrupting traditional business models in the space sector and therefore reducing the cost of accessing space. Now, the German space sector needs to adapt to seize business opportunities stemming from these changes, such that both Germany and Europe can keep the leadership and the strategic autonomy in space. And realizing these ambitions requires fostering investments, stimulating innovation, and nurturing an entrepreneurial space ecosystem in Germany and its various regions. Now, this overarching theme will be introduced by the two keynotes of today, who will set up the stage for the discussion on topics of innovation, key technologies which are shaping the decade ahead, funding and alternative financing, and potential synergies at the intersection of space and on-space industries. So I will start by introducing our first keynote speaker, Stefan Kupczyk from IABG. Stefan received his diploma in engineering and aeronautics and space technology from the University of Stuttgart in 1986. He spent 10 years working at the Dornier GmbH, where he started as a development engineer, working his way up to the head of future design and becoming the assistant to the managing director for the last 3 years. Sounds like a really busy schedule, Stefan. Now, from 1995 to 2002, he worked for the Fairchild Dornier GmbH, where he operated as the head of future technologies. And in 2002, Mr. Kupczyk joined IABG as referent flight physics and helicopters. Now he is the head of space division and manages all services of the space portfolio of IABG, such as environmental test campaigns, qualification tests, technical analysis, as well as studies and consulting services. So welcome to you, Stefan, and I invite you to share your screen and share with us a presentation that you've prepared for this panel.
Okay,
Just one moment. Okay, you can see it?
Yes.
Okay, that's fine. So thank you very much, Luisa, for this very kind introduction. Welcome to all participants of our galaxy Milky Way. I like this very much. And so I would like just to give a short overview where I'm coming from. As mentioned, I'm running a space division of IABG. This is a picture from our facility in the south of Munich. And just only one slide about the company. We are a company leading European technology and providing leading a European technology enterprise with the core competencies in analysis, simulation, and testing. And we operate several industrial plants with regards to safety and security. We are active in automotive, information communication, mobility, energy, aeronautics, defense and security, and of course in space. So the company is owned by 100% of the employees, in particular by one of the employees. So, but we are a completely independent company with a staff of about 1,000 employees. Now, I would like to start with a hypothesis. Actual development in space, like as Luisa mentioned, innovative technologies, digitalisation, miniaturisation, mass production, in particular for large constellation, and artificial intelligence, in combination with clever entrepreneurs financed by huge assets, in particular in the US, are disrupting traditional business models in space. Disrupting traditional business model in space. I would like to say that we can read such statements every day. We are getting easily convinced by examples like SpaceX, a very prominent example. But I always questioning myself, disrupting, what does it mean? Disrupting or interrupt, disrupt or disturb or disappear or destroy, or can we as well interpret complement? And I think it's a little bit from all. I try to structure space activities as follows. Traditional space. The space segment normally government financed, for example, for exploration, science, navigation, military Earth observation, and so on. The data used for governmental use and, of course, for commercially provided services. We have as well the space infrastructure, as well, mostly government financed, Galileo, other navigation systems all over the world. The IABG Space Test Center, you have seen a picture just in the beginning of my presentation, which is operated for more than 50 years, but in a private-public partnership. The ESA ESTEC Space Test Center, located next to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, operated by a joint venture from IABG and a French partner for more than 20 years, as well in a private-public partnership. And another, of course, very important space infrastructure, and I mentioned it here, the launch services, by example, for Ariane Space. Then we have a third segment, the space segment is commercially financed by telecommunication, Earth observation, by example, and the data mostly used for commercial provided services. The telecommunication satellites, I mean, are the large ones, which are in the geostationary orbit. I would like to give you a short overview about what we are doing in our Space Test Center. So we provide environmental test campaigns, vibration and shock, acoustic noise, modal survey, and structural survey, mass property measurements, space simulation in large or small thermal vacuum chambers, electromagnetic compatibility, and we have as well a magnetic test facility, which is unique in Europe, and in the size and accuracy, I think, from my feeling, as well unique in the world. New space. In the opposite to the traditional space, the space segment is normally commercially financed. The provided services used and financed by the government or commercially. For example, SpaceX and our new IABG's competence Center of Optics. I will come the next 2 pages. I will give you a short introduction about this as a new, really very innovative project. Space segment commercially used, commercially financed, and the provided services used and financed as well commercially. So this is, we are talking, I think, today about many startups, small launchers, small satellites, large satellite constellations, and the provided services direct to the customers. IABG is as well in this field active, and we are just under discussion with a customer, or let me say a partner, for the qualification of 1,800 solar arrays for a future satellite constellation. This is a completely new setup with new qualification methods and strategies, and so on. Just to give you a short overview, what we are doing in our, or would like to do in future in our competence center optics. This is as well a picture from the Space Test Center and beyond the new sketch for this competence center optics. We have already started the construction work, and on our own risk, of course, and we will sign the contract by next week. And we have a large thermal vacuum facility with large optical benches for optical payloads with an aperture of about up to 1.5 meter. And we put all our experience in this project, and it's a large investment of about nearly 100 million euro. I would like to come back. I think that the space business in total and the space activities will increase dramatically. Some well-established space activities, of course, will disappear by my hypothesis, also, and or will be replaced by ones. Some others will be changing, but will remain. My prediction is the so-called traditional space business will remain and moderately increase. However, the large and very interesting opportunities and the predicted large increase in related business will be found in the so-called area of new space in the next couple of years or maybe decades. Europe and as well Germany have a strong marketplace and position within Europe, together with our European Commission, with the European Space Agency and our national agencies, assuring the society's position in science, infrastructure, military and other fields of strategic interest. From my point of view, we have to ensure our national and European sovereignty on access to space and the ability to place and to operate space systems in Germany, but as well in Europe. And in Germany, I think micro launcher and its necessary infrastructure will become a key success factor more and more for keeping our strong German position in space activities. IABG is engaged in several new space activities. So we are supporting High Impulse. This is one of the 3 German micro launcher startups. We developing and marketing of services for space missions that allow for new adapted qualification philosophies. What I'm talking about is 1,800 solar panels, offering cost-optimized and lean test services on the basis of analysis results, helps to qualify our customer products developing and marketing of cost-effective and quickly realizable qualification options in orbit as IOV, so in-orbit validation, in-orbit demonstration, especially for small and medium-sized customers and companies for their products and projects that will get a heritage, a space heritage to affordable price and on short-term notice. Provision and consulting services and adapted test concepts for new space companies and projects. The creation of concepts for a national launch platform of micro-launchers, I mentioned it already, and the establishment of a consortium and application for funding for such a launch platform. These are the actual projects we are working on in this segment. In general, we will be successful in Germany and in Europe as well. In future, it will rely on if we will rely on our genuinity, on our first-class education we have here in Europe, and on our exploratory urge. We have to consider that the success in this field requires clever and innovative business models, innovative engineers in combination with excellent business guys. In addition to the billions of euros we spend in research, and we need financing models, in particular for startups, for small companies, in order to bring our fantastic research results and technologies from the universities, from the research organization into business models. Unfortunately, up to now, I see a large problem of bureaucracy and rigid processes in Germany. That this is more, I think, more relevant actually than a lack of money. We need a promotional environment with a minimum of bureaucracy to finance our entrepreneurs in particular, but not to limit to the starting phase of their business. Here we have to work together with our politicians in order to enable their administrations to provide the necessary suitable instruments. Unfortunately, and with this sentence I would close my presentation, unfortunately, such instruments are currently not yet widely available. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Stefan. So it was valuable to know what actually comprises of what traditional space is, where you see that all those missions that involve huge infrastructure and huge efforts to execute and to bring to fruition these big missions that are still pretty much being sponsored by public money in comparison to this new space, which is led by private money, entrepreneurs, and etc. Yeah, and it's also very interesting to learn about IABG's perspective of what is needed, let's say, to bridge the gap between an ideal future of space leadership with Germany at the steering wheel and the status quo, let's say. So, all right. With this, then I invite to the stage the second keynote speaker. So Sven Meyer-Brunswick. So Sven joined Minarik in 2016, and he has led the company's fundraising efforts to ensure continued growth over the last couple of years, and as such, materially bolstered Minarik's transformation from a garage shop to a well-respected scale-up. So kudos, Sven, for your work. Now, with a background in technology and business, and knowing the company and its market inside out, he was appointed COO of Minarik in April 2020 to coordinate Minarik's product roadmap and its implementation through the company's engineering and production departments. So first of all, Stefan, you perhaps need to stop sharing the screen so that Sven can start sharing his screen now. All right. All right, Sven, the floor is all yours then.
Okay, very good. Thanks a lot. I want to talk a little bit about, so today's topic is about preparing for 2030, right? So I want to talk a little bit about how 2030 will look like, because we need to know that in order to prepare accordingly. first thing is we have to realize where we stand today. So where's education today and where it should be 2030. Today, and this picture here is from Myanmar, and I've been myself to Myanmar actually 4 years ago and visited a very similar school to what we are seeing here. And they're quite nicely equipped, so they have school books and they're doing math and language and all the topics you need to know, even physics and science, of course. But what they lack is digital education, really. So there's no computers, there's no smartphones, there's no connectivity, no internet. And this is increasingly a problem because, of course, if you look at the workplaces available in on high-paying jobs, they all involve utilization of computers and digital technologies. And if you're not being educated on that, that's a problem in your ability to move vertically along the social ladder, really. As a matter of fact, today 4 billion people are not yet connected to the internet. So many schools are not connected as well, and many kids are not being educated on how to use the internet and how to leverage the power and the knowledge you can find there. So one goal for 2030 should of course be that all schools are being connected. I mean, that's the basic building block, I would say, to getting hundreds and millions of people out of poverty. So that's one important goal we should be working to, and space can play a very big role in that. Secondly, industry. We tend to think of industry as being all super modern, right? And if you're looking at the industries that are located in the city center, it is pretty modern. It's all very digital, and through the currently ongoing pandemic, we've all learned to work with Zoom calls and team calls, and it's a lot of home office, and it's all digital, right? But many industries haven't seen that. As a matter of fact, industries such as shipping and aviation and agriculture, infrastructure, many of these industries have not seen the digital shift that we've seen all around the world in the last 30 years. They're essentially still living in the Stone Age, where nothing is connected at all, because connectivity is too expensive. I mean, if you're driving a container ship these days across the ocean, you're essentially cut off from the internet, or maybe the entire ship has a 5 Mbit connection, something like that. And it's super expensive too. You can imagine it as that everything that has happened digitally in many industries has not reached these kind of industries that are still unconnected. There's huge potential once these industries are being connected to leverage the power of digital technologies, really, and to unlock trillions of US dollars of economic growth. So I'd say that's the second goal we should have for 2030, to get all industries connected, because that too hasn't happened yet. The upside is that this is already happening. So there's a path to providing global connectivity, and it's essentially internet from space. And I mean, this is an artist's visualization of it, and probably it will look a little bit different. But what's the underlying thesis is that the internet today, as we all know it and use it every day, it's just 50% complete, essentially. And the next 10 years will be really about completing the internet. So building the other 50% of that internet. That's the mission many organizations are on at the moment. And how will that be done? Well, it will be through networks of satellites. So before we've heard the keyword of satellite constellations already, and this is exactly that, right? We will see, and we are seeing, in fact, already, hundreds and thousands of satellites that will be essentially building up a new layer of the internet, happening in space, and some of it in the airborne domain, in the atmosphere through flying vehicles. But today is mostly about space. So in space, you will see thousands of satellites that are working as network nodes and will beam the internet down from space to the ground and bring it really everywhere. Because today the internet is limited very much to where you have a lot of end users per area. And whenever you go to less densely populated areas, or to areas where you have less devices per square kilometer per area, it's not worthwhile to install fiber optic cables and cell phone towers. So you don't have connectivity, or you have really expensive satellite connectivity today of very large geostationary satellites. And this is going to change. In the future, we will see thousands, tens of thousands of satellites that are all interconnected with each other and function as an addition to the existing internet. So it's not replacing the internet as we know it. It's coming on top of it to provide connectivity to places that don't have connectivity today. So also this is not a competition to 5G or something. It's complementing 5G. It's important to note that this is not just a vision, right? This is already happening. And here I've took 2 pictures of SpaceX because that's probably the most prominent organization working in this space, really. SpaceX alone launched close to 1,000 satellites already for this very purpose. And what you see on the right here is the rocket fairing of a Falcon 9. In fact, with every single rocket, they can launch 60 satellites at the moment. So it's a paradigm shift in the industry. This has never happened before, right? In the past, you would use 1 rocket for 1 satellite. And that was a very large satellite that would operate for 10, 15 years or so in geostationary orbit. These guys over in the US, they're launched in 60 satellites with 1 rocket. And they only operate them for 3 or 5 years because after that, they say the technology is so outdated that it's not worthwhile operating these satellites anymore. So they need to launch the next generation of it. So this is exactly starting now. SpaceX is not the only organization, it's just the one being most talked about in the industry. There's OneWeb, there's Telesat, there's Amazon hugely invested in this and going to invest billions of US dollars in this market. So mind that this is happening. This is not a vision. This is, and this is very much at the core of what new space really is, I'd say. What do we do? What is Mynaric doing in this space? We do space lasers quite literally. So we manufacture equipment to connect the satellites with each other. It's the next best thing to an optical fiber. In space and between satellites, you cannot deploy an optical fiber to bring data from one satellite to another. But you can do something very similar, which is essentially use a laser pointer and direct it to another satellite, switch it very quickly on and off. And this is how you can transmit data, ones and zeros. This is what we are doing. So we are designing and manufacturing equipment to do just that. It's an enabling technology for these kind of networks. So networks bring or providing global broadband services. And we believe we are the leading company doing that out of Germany. So we're a spin-off from the German Aerospace Center, really. We believe we are the leading company industrializing this technology because that's new. And that's, again, very much to the core of the new space scene. It's about commercializing technologies. It's about industrialization, not so much about research. So we are doing just that. Maybe a few words on how it is like working at Mynaric. It's a little bit like welcome to the future. And we again, today's topic is about preparing for 2030. We're doing just that, right? We're a high-tech startup of about 150 colleagues, or so a little more actually, and we're growing every month by at least 10% typically. We have more than 30 nations in our team, and we are preparing a company for this very market. We are building up a company to serve a market of tens of thousands of satellites that need to be interconnected with laser communication equipment. And here you just see one snapshot. So not all our colleagues are working like that, really. But it looks like a science fiction movie sometimes of what we're doing. And when we are talking with our customers of what they're planning, it's quite jaw-dropping what's happening. With that, I want to finish my short keynote here. One last note, if you're interested in that, you're hiring a lot, we're growing a lot. Probably the company will be in a couple of years multiple times the size of what it is today. We just took in another 50 million euros of growth capital, really. This Thursday, we have a virtual coffee hour where some of our colleagues are really explaining how it is like to work here. So I would encourage you to join us for that. And also have a look at our website. We have more than 30 positions open. I just counted that today. But it's always changing. Probably every week there's a new position open. So continuously check that. And with that, that's all from my side for now. And I would hand back to Lisa then.
All right, thank you, Sven. So it seems that you pretty much are on spot in identifying digitalization and interconnectedness as key enablers of future technologies. And it's interesting to see also Minaric's role in trying to make that happen. And yeah, if you thought that lasers were cool, then space lasers sounds twice as cool. So very good to hear Minaric's perspective. So I would like now to take this opportunity to bring about the next Mentimeter question that we have for our audience, that is about the next disruptive technologies. So I invite you all to tune in again to the menti.com with the key access code of 7897113, and let us know which technologies you think will disrupt the space sector in this decade. All right, seems that it's getting tight between small launchers and AI.
It's also quite fitting that we're seeing this result, given that, especially Stefan mentioned that small launches are the future for new space. So that's definitely visible there. Oh, now we're moving to AI, which is also core of many things. So it's pretty good to see that up on there.
Yeah. Unfortunately, satellite navigation doesn't seem to be very popular as a potential disruptive technology.
I think we need to stop and just have the panel with Stefan Baumann to learn about satellite navigation. Because there's so much more to it than just the Google Maps or whatever you're using in your phone. So
Absolutely.
it's a bit sad to see that, but okay. All right. So I think we have a pretty good idea that AI and small launches are right on top, and then I think we can close.
All right, so in this queue, it's my pleasure to announce and introduce the three other members of the panel, which have not yet been introduced. So Sven was a keynote speaker. He's also in the panel. We will have similarly Thomas Zinn, Rainer Horn, and Stefan Baumann. So Stefan Baumann received his diploma in physical geography from the Ludwig Maximilians University of Munich in 1995. And after working 2 years in the areas of surveying, remote sensing, and geoinformation services, he became involved in GNSS and especially Galileo in 1996. Stefan, you have to prove us wrong. You have to prove the Mentimeter wrong with your background now. And Stefan also received his PhD in 2002 from the Heinrich Heine University, Düsseldorf. And in 2006, he joined IABG and became engaged in the area of security-related aspects and the usage of GNSS, and especially Galileo's public regulation services. And as a program manager at IABG, he is responsible for multiple national and international public regulated service projects. So welcome, Stefan. So the next panelist, Rainer Horn, is from Space Tech Partners. Rainer has nearly 20 years of experience in consulting and finance. He has consulted private and institutional clients in aerospace, automotive, transportation, and telecoms on the domains of strategy, market analysis, organizational, and financial matters. He's an accredited coach for leading seed funds, and he works with several startups and SMEs. At Booz Allen Hamilton, Rainer led the space services and telematics practice and managed European business operations as a finance director. Heine also obtained an MBA from INSEAD and a dual degree from the ESB Reutling London in European Business. Heine is a member of the European Commission's Galileo Advisory Board, shaping the future of satellite navigation in Europe. Heine is an avid skier and enjoys playing squash. And last but not least, we have Thomas Sin. And Thomas is founder of DCubed, which stands for Deployable Cubed GmbH, a Munich-based SME focusing on the development of actuators and deployables specifically designed for new space applications, for example, smallsat and nanosats. Before joining DCubed, Thomas worked at the Munich SME called HPS at the European Space Agency's Tech Center in ESTEC in Noordwijk and participated in the ISU SSP summer program, space summer program, if I remember correctly, at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Thomas did his PhD in deployable smart space structures in Glasgow, including a couple of in-space demonstrations. So Thomas, are you also a skier like Heine?
Yes.
Very nice. All right. So before we start putting our questions forward to the panel, just a quick reminder to our audience that you are very welcome to use the Q&A chat function to throw in your questions, and we'll randomly mix them with our own during this panel. So with this, I would like to then start with the first question for this panel for Thomas. So the question is, so in the global context that is changing so fast, and given the impact of new technologies on society, we know that this impact is exponential. So how do you expect that new technologies will impact our lives in general and by this decade, so by 2030?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. And also thanks for the introduction and inviting me to this panel. I'm quite excited to be here. So we see right now a dramatic change in the space industry. And the global space industry is about to grow by a threefold when we believe some of the market analysis until 2030. And one of the main fields where it's growing is also small satellite technology and nanosatellites. It's really, there is a lot of new businesses coming out. And I also liked when Sven presented about what they are doing at Mynaric and what is the whole shift towards new space, because that already took quite some words out of my answer. But right now, there's really a shift for going away from government funded projects to more business in space. And right now we see it most permanently with SpaceX, with the internet from space. Then there is companies looking at Earth observation data. And I really believe, like we saw before with this poll, that also artificial intelligence, and I also think personally space robotic will play a key role in the next decade. And things are just developing so quickly that it's really hard to make a prediction for the next 10 years. Because if we also think that by 2024, we should already going back to the moon and then establishing a moon base there. There's also various new business cases coming out here. And if finally space mining kicks off, that will be creating even more. So I'm really looking forward to what kind of new technologies can be done from space. And I think with technologies like what Mynaric is developing with the space lasers, it will be quite exciting to see.
Surely. So thank you very much. It's a very complete answer and right to the point.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky to have a full answer with what will happen because the potential is just so huge. If you see the amazing growth that we'll see in space, and we don't see much from impact from COVID. I'm very excited for next 10 years. That's why I also decided to make a startup in the new space field. So
For sure.
now I'm
And
done.
I think absolutely, absolutely. And I think a lot of the potential is perhaps not one technology in particular, is perhaps the merging of several different technologies and applications, the application of these technologies.
Yes, exactly.
So now I have a question for Stefan. And so could you tell me that as far as space is concerned, so which technologies will impact the sector the most, in your opinion, and how will these technologies affect the space sector? And in which way is your organization, let's say, which way is your organization also preparing for the upcoming technologies that are potentially disrupting your business?
So I think satellite technology or space technology is used more and more for safety and security related application or commercial applications. And the dependency on space assets is growing. So I think in general, the security in space systems will become more and more important in the future. And I work a lot in the satellite navigation area, a little bit in SATCOM. And for satellite navigation, in the first years after satellite navigation became available, the big hype was accuracy. So all these differential GNSS methodologies have been developed to increase the accuracy. And if you follow the development in recent years, the current hype is reliability and resilience. So due to the dependency on many applications on GNSS, the robustness is becoming more and more important. And this is not only for positioning and navigation, but also for synchronization applications, because GNSS is used today a lot in critical infrastructures like mobile communication, power networks, financial transactions as a time source. And the current systems are answering this request. So, for example, in Galileo, additional authentication methodology will be introduced in the open service, also in the commercial and the high accuracy service. And of course, in Galileo, there's this public regulated service, PRS, which offers a very high level of robustness and security. And this is a service which will not only be usable by the defense, by the military, but also by other governmental authorized users. So I think this robustness and resilience will be becoming more and more important. Also, maybe not only space-based, also in combination with terrestrial systems, for example, the mobile communication-based localization systems. Especially with the new developments in 5G, very accurate localization methodologies for indoor applications will become available, which complement satellite navigation very good, because if you're in an open field, you have a good view to the satellites and can do your positioning with the satellites. If you come in an indoor environment, the signals are too weak. So this could be very good combined with other terrestrial methods. For satellite communication, also security, I think, is a big topic with all this GovSatcom initiative taken on European level on new technologies like quantum cryptology or quantum key distribution, for example. And what we are doing at IABG, we are increasing our activities to test the GNSS for safety critical applications. We surely base strong on space technologies, but we also try to combine this with other senseful technologies which help to make satellite navigation more robust. And maybe coming back to the poll in the beginning, of course, it's a pity. I think that satellite navigation received no votes, but it's understandable, because if you want to do a position fix, you need at least a line of sight connection to 4 satellites. 8 or 10 satellites are better than you can pick up the satellites with the best geometry. So it's really an effort, I think, to have this high availability. But maybe it's a good option to put combined payload on these small communication satellites, and also provide navigation capabilities from lower orbits in the future.
Thank you very much, Stefan, for this extensive answer, and it's really good to have you because it shows that the original polling was wrong and that satellite navigation is like the best that we have. Okay, well, wonderful. Okay, so moving on to the next set of questions, which is a combination of, let's say, 3 questions for Rainer Horn. How does the general public see investments made into space and other high-tech areas, especially in Germany and Munich? Do they understand and see the value of space applications? And also, is there anything to improve? And you're still muted.
Hi, Daniel. Hi,
yeah, perfect.
Luisa and the panel. Thanks for inviting me and thanks for putting this up. Yeah, we'll gladly give you my perspective on this. I actually got lured into the space arena by Galileo, by the GNSS world. As an automotive telematics industry consultant, I saw the space 19 years ago and got involved in it systematically at the time. Now, in the meantime, a lot has happened. Space has become the backbone of the digital age. Digitalization was probably not so paramount. But I would say there's probably every 5-10 years, there has been a step change that users and the public have experienced the benefits of space. 2005, Google Earth came about, TomTom came about. People were experiencing more in a geographic way, and they were also experiencing that there is something out there other than astronauts, rockets, and a satellite communication TV satellites, and maybe the odd satellite that gives you weather information. Now, 10 years later, 2015, everybody latest had a GNSS device in their pocket, which was also integrating with other things. At the same time, you got high resolution weather apps through better things in your pocket, and you could really experience it, and there was no question about it. The next big step is probably going to be SATCOM internet, or at least better internet connectivity in different places. How it reaches you as an individual person in the end doesn't matter so much. I think that's really for people. I think the first question is, do people understand what space gives you before they can assess whether the investments done in Bavaria are of any benefit? I mean, I'm traveling a lot in the world in normal times, and we're hearing, yes, definitely Europe, Bavaria and Munich are well known for the DLR, for the capabilities of the space companies around here. And definitely they have seen that there have been investments in the Galileo Center, that there have been visible political announcements in Bavaria 1 and so forth. Whether they materialize in the end or not, people forget. And if 3 years or 2 years later, the Prime Minister stands up and opens a rocket factory, people think it was actually reality. So there is a myth and there's a lot of marketing around it. And I think Bavaria has done a reasonably good job of advertising and attracting and people seeing what is happening. Also, we saw that some companies grew substantially in the last few years since the financial crisis. OHB in particular attracted lots of people from around the world, or especially from Europe, to work here. And I think Munich is seen as one of the main places for space, definitely. With its triangle of Oberpfaffenhofen, Ottobrunn re-emerging with what is built there as a campus, and of course Garching in the north with a complementary IT capability, and in the middle you have a bustling venture scene, but also lots of big companies that can help getting the application global.
Wonderful. That's a pretty good answer, and also the emphasis on seeing what people actually get from space and having them like realize and recognize that certain technologies that they use on a daily basis are actually coming from space or are space derived, to make them value space investments more is definitely a huge topic. And this whole like outreach and marketing in a sense is definitely something that maybe some space sectors might need to do more work on. But it's a good first answer, so thank you for that one. Moving on to the final question for this introduction round, targeted towards Sven. What is the technology that will be the deal breaker in 2030? And what should Germany do to not miss the train and be well positioned in future?
Well, I really don't think it's about one technology. I think what's important to consider is that or what will be the deal breaker by 2030, and this is essentially what's being built up today, is that we are building up infrastructure, right? We're building all these companies around the world working on space and working on new space business models. They're working towards the dream to establishing infrastructure on which you can run businesses, because we're not, what's new to the space business is that you're not doing space for the purpose of space, because you want to explore what's out there, or because you're interested in how the moon looks like or other planets. You're doing it because it brings benefit on Earth, either through navigation or through broadband or something like that. And what we and other companies are doing at the moment is we're building up infrastructure. And it's a little bit of an overused example maybe, but it's the same with the iPhone and the App Store, right? The iPhone was the infrastructure that had to be invented first and had to be built up first before all the applications could run on that. And today, I mean, we're using services like Uber and Fedora and I don't know what not, because we're having these cell phones in our pockets. So entire industries are emerging because infrastructure all of a sudden is available. So I think by 2030, space will be in a similar shape. Space will be available as an infrastructure, as a provider for several kinds of services to companies. And these companies, and that's the really interesting bit about it, this industry that's being built on top of space services will be probably 10 or 100 times as large as the space sector itself providing this infrastructure. So the really exciting stuff is what's going to run on the space infrastructure. And I think that's the key technology, if you want to say so. But it's an entire supply chain, of course, being built up. And it's not just artificial intelligence or just electric propulsion or just laser communication or just any technology. It's the sum of these technologies building up the infrastructure that allows business cases to flourish on top of that. And then on the second part of the question, what can Germany do not to miss the train? And Europe in general, I'd say we need to be bolder. We need to have the courage to think big and act big. It's crazy what's happening at the moment. If you're looking to the US and you're looking to China, what kind of money and momentum is being invested in building up this infrastructure because it has been understood what's going to happen there. And Europe is essentially doing nothing, right? I mean, in Europe, I think two months ago or so, there was a study started by the European Commission to find out whether a satellite constellation would be feasible. I mean, really, SpaceX has launched 1,000 satellites by now, and we're doing a study. The study is, I think, finished by February or so next year, and then probably we're going through 2 years of understanding what has been found out in the study, and then what's the result? That we are starting to ask Airbus to build two satellites. I mean, we have to act differently. We have to act faster, and we have to have the courage to be bold and think bold, because we have great technology in Europe. It's not that we don't have the technology. We are just lacking the ambition to deploy it at scale, or leave it to the others to deploy it at scale. So if I could wish one thing for Germany, it would be to be bolder. And that's the politicians, that's the entrepreneurs, that's everyone.
That's great. And also like focusing on downstream and the whole applications segment that comes after the infrastructure has been set up. That's definitely good, and certainly something that we, like me and my company, try to emphasize as well, because that's like where the money is in the end. And it's great that you also mentioned like Germany to be bolder and to maybe reduce bureaucracy, which nicely ties into what Stefan said in the beginning in his keynote. So that's pretty good. And I think we have some questions from the audience, and Luisa will ask some of them.
Yes, Sven, you seem to be popular in the Q&A chat. So I'll just go ahead and shoot you some quick questions, and you can just give some quick answers as well. So I guess I'll start with the easy ones actually. So the first question is, who will be the customers of your laser tech? Will SpaceX buy from you? And do you have a partnership with Telesat?
So who's our customers? We sell to satellite primes, so satellite manufacturers, the kind of companies that are producing these hundreds and thousands of satellites for satellite operators. They're our direct customers. And of course, we entertain links to both the satellite operators or the operators of the satellite constellations, as well as the satellite manufacturers. And we sell to these. Now on specific companies, I cannot comment, right? I mean, we are stock listed by now, so we have to be quite careful what we say and what we don't say. But all, I can comment on the last question, which is, are we working with Telesat? And that's public information. I mean, we're quite happy that we have secured a partnership with Telesat and DARPA. I mean, DARPA may not be a name for all of us, but that's essentially where the internet was born, right? DARPA came up with the ARPANET. Back in the days, and this is how the internet came all about. I believe we see the same thing happening all over again. So the DARPA again is doing the baby steps for how the next wave, as I said, the completion of the internet will be taking place. So we're quite happy that we're working with DARPA and with Telesat in partnership to demonstrate our technology and get this next level of the internet being built.
All right, thank you. Now, a little bit more on the provocative side, we got another question for you, Sven. So how do you assess the risk of only a few companies monopolizing the internet from space and limiting its benefits to only those who can afford it?
And I mean, I think today we are seeing, again, it's the baby steps. This is the first few companies playing around and starting to use the technology that will be used at scale in the not too far future. So I don't believe it will remain these few companies. I believe, in fact, in maybe even by 2030, we shouldn't be thinking of this internet in space as separate, disconnected layers. I firmly believe myself that we would see a very similar development in the long run as we see in the internet as it is today. So we as users won't know how our data is being routed through the network. And some of it will go through space, some of it will go through air, some of it will go through the ground. All these different networks will be interconnected, and the different operators of different parts of the network, they will monetize the data that is running through their pipes, essentially, right? But I don't believe there will be one or two companies playing the monopoly card and saying, well, we only serve this part of the market. And in the long run, it will be all connected, because it's not so different from an architecture perspective or from a business plan perspective than the terrestrial internet. So I don't see any reason why these kind of networks should look in the long run so much different than the kind of infrastructure we are seeing when it comes to terrestrial internet.
All right. Now, thank you for your inputs then.
And just one remark for all of the panelists. Whenever you feel like you have some input to any of the questions, feel free to unmute and jump in and contribute. Yes.
I'd like to contribute to the topic of the monopoly in space for space internet. I mean, you see now the main drivers are Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. Obviously, they have deep pockets and they have the mobility with their vision to mobilize others and mobilize even the stock market into the frenzy behind it. Jeff Bezos has just bought himself the concept of a constellation, and he will use his space elevator to bring thousands of satellites up there until they're proven to put humans on it, because eventually also he wants to put humans into space. And he even has the use case for it. He doesn't need customers. He can connect his data centers around the world with his internet and build scale at large. Even if it's just the private Amazon internet in the end, it will probably pay off for them. So I think we have to look at it from very different dimensions. At the same time, you've got a Chinese internet being cut off from the Western internet, so to speak. there will be a Chinese space internet as well coming in. And we have to see from the European side, which side are we on, or is there a third way of it? But definitely, I think we should look at that one as the monopoly more as a GAFAM game plus SpaceX, or do we want to have a more secure internet for being the backbone of our digital industry and our normal industry going more and more digital, yeah? And not having all the data going over third-party, foreign-owned networks.
All right, I think those are very good points and very much complementary to what Sven has mentioned as well. All right, so I would like to perhaps look a little bit forward and talk a little bit about industrial synergies. And perhaps I would like to know from Thomas from D-Cubed, so that if Germany was able to set itself as the worldwide leader in automotive, could we aim to another made in Germany type of leading technology or type of movement in space by 2030? And if so, what are you going to do to make this happen?
Yeah, there's a good question that I'm answering, that I'm asking myself over the last couple of years, because Germany used to be the leader, and now in space, especially in new space, we see Germany lacking behind because America is so fast going ahead here. It's also for us as a subsystem manufacturer, most of our customers are from the US, and we just are also trying to get this wave of excitement here in Europe, but it's just not there yet, even though that Jan Werner said in the last ministerial conference that now Europe will be there will be more for new space companies, more for these upstream and downstream markets available. We don't see much of that yet coming through. We have in talks with DLR, with ESA, but the support is just slow right now. What I really think that we need is that first, it is easier to get funding. So from ESA, from DLR, that there is not so much bureaucracy involved. And then it's also, we need more high-risk investment here, because we are not looking at business ideas that are already bearing fruit next year or in 2 years. We have to think of these more crazy ideas, the ideas that are further away, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to just redo what the Americans were doing. We have to look at technology that is not there yet, technology where we can really be better and become the leader. We should not try to just redo what is already done, but really focus on these more crazy ideas. And that's really is more investment, and then also more startup will come and make these ideas a reality. And then Germany can be the same as the leader with the automobiles, because back then they were also the first one. They tried it, they put the risk there, they put the people in these crazy machines, and at the end it paid out. And this is what we need now as well.
And I'd like to chime in here, because I think actually that the investment money is available. What we are lacking, and you rightly said that the technology cycles and maturity cycles are very long in space, right? I mean, we are at 10 years, or more than 10 years since our foundation, and now we're coming with first producible products to the market. So that's the kind of cycles you're looking at, which is too long for conventional investors, and they don't understand this the space literally well enough, because it's too new, all these business models. So what you need, and that unlocks the money, is the government as anchor customer, quite frankly. I don't believe, I'm not a fan of the government investing itself. I don't think that's the right model. But the government should be the one acting as anchor customer. And that's what we're seeing in the US, right? I mean, the NASA has launched the Commercial Crew Program, what was it, almost 10 years ago, I believe, which was the reason to found SpaceX, essentially. And tomorrow, actually, the first, very exciting, the first Crew 1 launch will be happening. So the first commercial launch of astronauts to space will be happening tomorrow. That's the result of the government, the US government in that case, acting as an anchor customer. This is how SpaceX was created. And we need that in Germany. That's still not understood, and it's still not happening. I believe if we have that, and that's lacking from the investor perspective as well, if you have the proof that you can make money with space business, and the government is a very a trustworthy first customer, right? If they're saying there is a market, we are paying, I don't know, we are buying at least some 100 terabit per year from satellite constellations. If there is a German or European one, then you would have all the money in the world to build up these companies. No problem there. There's so much money in German family offices and in German bank accounts. If you have the anchor customers, that's all fine. But we're lacking the governmental anchor customers. And this is why Europe is falling behind, if you ask me.
I think that's very right. I also see that right now in Europe, mostly governments were always putting the money down to build this technology, but they should be also the customer at a later stage and really putting the money down. Yeah.
Well, I guess meaning anchor customer means being the customer before the technology is being finally developed, to incentivize many companies to come up with competing concepts. Some might fall out, but there is something at the end. And the US has worked like that for many years already before. When they needed spy satellites, different companies were competing for providing that capacity in the end, but they knew there is a market, so they were investing in big spy satellites that could also be used commercially. And the same thing now needs to happen for some other areas. We're seeing a bit of an attempt of that in the area of the small launchers, where some subsidies are being promised with ESA money for the new startups that are coming in this area. And we're probably going to see the government buying launch capacity for small companies, but that's just like another development grant, just distribute competitively afterwards. But the real end user, saying the military, Secret Service, other authorities and so forth, that is not happening yet. And I think that could be the real revolution to spark companies from the ground. Another angle that I'd like to bring here is the sources of innovation. I think in Europe, we do not have enough push that government money is being translated and transferred into businesses. In Europe, people are spinning off very rarely from research center. 10 years ago, I was advising the founders of Mynaric for half a year when they were in the incubation center in Oberpfaffenhofen, and helping them, 3 researchers, to take an entrepreneurial view of the world. And they were very courageous. Unfortunately, we don't have enough of those. Sometimes I'm saying people go to Stanford as long as and they study as long as they can afford it and have a good enough idea to create a business. In Europe, they create a business when they kind of at the end of their research career. They're 35 and they're kind of more risk averse. Yeah, and I think we should create more incentives for researchers and people to actually bring that knowledge actively into the market.
And I think you said something very important in your first part of your answer, which I would want to emphasize. It's important that when we're thinking about the government as an anchor customer, government shouldn't prescribe the solution. They should say what kind of service they want to buy, and the startups and also as established companies, the market essentially, they should come up with a solution stretch, right? And the government should buy whatever brings the best cost-efficient solution to their problem, but not buying a predefined system. This is not how you buy efficiently and how you build up a supply chain. And I also agree with your last part, but I just had this thought on your first part of your answer.
So I just want to jump in very quickly because it also relates to the question that was raised in the chat regarding the satellites, the space debris. what are all these satellites, what will happen to them. There's actually one example at ESA where they are now trying to buy a service, and it's really a mission that will try to catch one of these space debris objects. For now, they just will bring the space debris object with them and catch it. But at the end, it's a Swiss company that will then be paid for the service of removing space debris. So that's already something is happening there, but it needs to be more. So that was my last ad. Thanks.
That's also a pretty good input. I would just like to involve the two Stefans of IABG. So since you do quite a lot at IABG regarding the test centers you have, and this competence center, and also some new space ventures that you're about to launch, what is your role as one of the more established companies in all of this, relating to the question that was originally asked about how can we become a world leader, and what can we do as companies, or what can you do as IABG in this case?
May I try to answer your question? IABG, with you mentioned, with space test centers, with the planned center of competence optics, act as a service provider, and I think we are not building satellites in our company, but we are part of this business, and we provide the services, and we have to develop and to adapt our service to the future needs. We do this based on our experience, of course, but this is as well our task to use new technologies in order to meet your let me say the expectation of the one hand side, small companies as well as established companies in the, as I mentioned, in the traditional space business, and on the other hand, in the new space business. This is a challenge we have to work on, and we have already, with regards to new space customers, we have since years already provide services, qualification services to industry, to universities, to startups coming out from university, and now we have to adapt our services to a large, this increasing market, and so that that we can be as well part of this part of the space business.
All right. Thank you very much for that one. Since we had quite an intense discussion in this one, we will jump to the next section, which tackles investments and entrepreneurship as a whole. And we will start this with another Mentimeter. So everyone get ready to add in your answers, and I'll just need to stop this one once more, and then we can. 1 second. So coming up with the third question, what are the biggest challenges to access funding in Germany? And we just want to get an idea from the audience, type in whatever you think could be, from your perspective, the biggest challenge, and then we'll move on with the panel and see if the panelists agree. All right. You see some interesting answers and also some that we and the keynote speakers and panelists have mentioned before. So the biggest one being bureaucracy right now, conservatism, certainly something as well. Yeah, okay, accessing funding in German kind of requires a German knowledge. So yeah, that's definitely a point. Could be more international in some segments, I guess. All right. So I think we have some good buzzwords to know that it's available, risk appetite and cultural mindset.
Absolutely. It seems like the problem is not the lack of money, but it's everything that goes around the culture, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's starting from knowing that funding is available, then finding it, accessing it, maybe as an also non-German startup. So yeah, okay. All right. I think we can close this one and move on to the questions and discussions.
Indeed, I think this already provides a good idea of what the issues of the public, or how the public perceives entrepreneurship in Germany. So I guess I would like perhaps to ask Rainer if you could specify any policies or guidelines that can help push new space into Germany. So perhaps new VC initiatives, service contracts, the entrepreneurial mindset itself. So what is actually working well and what can be improved?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, since we did a study on new space more than 4 years ago for the German Ministry of Economy, which is downloadable from our website, there's quite a lot has happened, I must say. I think a few predictions of saying the Berlin ecosystem needs to play a role with its digital competence, and we see some activity from there. We see some more local national activities happening. We see things like the BDI New Space Breakfast happening, and due to COVID times, attracting people from not only the ones who commute to Berlin to go there, or the people who managed to the one lunch that we hosted in Munich, but it's really broadening the realm of people who are beyond the traditional space lobbyists and space bureaucrats in the widest sense. So I think a lot of things are happening. Also, Germany took it more serious, the whole topic, and extra money was funded for more entrepreneurial-like grant instruments. And Germany prides itself as having funded the most from all the member states in the last ministerial. On the other hand, what I think is probably a bit short-sighted, one assumes funds are available and paramount on all different stages, and you just have to put more generic incentives into the market, and then things will happen. There are generic things for the German market that are just not as optimal for it, because they're just discussing now options law to be introduced and different type of incentives on the VC side. So yeah, so definitely a few things are beyond the space side, but on the space side specifically, there is still the hope that funds that are in the making, generally generic funds and deep tech funds, would find it attractive enough to work in this. There was a comment in the Mentimeter about German, not German. Personally, I think those entrepreneurs who are not diverse enough and don't speak well enough English, they should stay out of this industry. They should go into a local carekeeper business or something else where they can get by with German. But I haven't seen anyone proposing a German business case in many years in my practice as an early stage investor. So I don't think a German language is a real issue to access investors altogether. Obviously, the interaction will be more with German-speaking angels at the beginning, but most documentation is then done in English anyway, because you need it later in English. So that would be my take on it.
Yeah, but I guess the application process as it stands, it seems that it's very much focused in the German language. So all these milestones to get to the funding, at least for public funding, let's say.
I mean, the only program you have probably is a DLR program, and that is 200 million euro, which are effectively pre-distributed between the people who are part of the industrial club. I think there's very, very little access to it. Everything else is English language, ESA, European Commission, GSA, and so forth. So I wouldn't know where there's a real problem. And frankly speaking, those companies that want to become grant-entrepreneurs and live off grants, they don't have the right attitude to be the people who built the industry anyway. I mean, it has to, co-funding from the government is nice. It's non-dilutive money, but definitely they need to first and foremost have a customer perspective. They need to understand and prove that they have a real market and not only hope of the government being their market. And we've seen some nice examples also in the Bavarian ecosystem here, where companies prove a market before even having a satellite up there.
All right. I think that's an absolute fair point. And indeed, grantpreneurs are not, let's say, innovation oriented in this sense. Absolutely.
Yeah,
all right.
I just want to quickly jump in here because yeah, if you're just grant oriented, if you're going from study to study, then you will not make a business case. But it's a nice option to have this equity free money. And that's something that we realize there's actually a lot of different fundings available out there. You just need to know that it exists. So also here in Bavaria, we were able to receive quite some grants, but there is the problem. Yeah, it needs to be in German, Bavarian.
And they help you to a certain stage, but they don't scale, right? So you can't scale the company based on grants. They can help you to bootstrap and get the basic technology going. And we did that a lot in the first years. But at some point you hit a wall and you can't further build up a company based on that. Or at least not with a business model in the new space kind of sense. Of course, you can build companies based on grants, right? And that's a fair business model, but not what we are talking about here today, really.
And perhaps in connection to that, Sven, do you think that should big companies, should big aerospace companies actually invest more in startups? Do you think that would provide more opportunities? Or would these companies just see the smaller ones as competitors?
Well, I would answer. I can't answer from the big company perspective. I can answer from the small startup perspective. I don't believe for a startup it's good to be bought by a big company in the early phase of its life, really, because that, I mean, there's a reason why you have large corporates being very good in providing services and products to established markets, and why startups every once in a while manage to disrupt entire industries because they're small and agile and are better at adapting to a market need, right? And that should stay as that. So it's not good, I believe, to when you're 20 people to go to one of the big guys and tell them, now I want to sell to you and you make the business big, because that's too early. So yeah, maybe the short answer is that I wouldn't recommend just selling the business right away. What's interesting is that these large corporates, I mean, for us, for example, they can be competitor, partner, or customer, or all three of that at the same time. So don't consider large corporates as monolithic blocks of they have just this one function. They are a potential exit strategy. They could be an excellent customer. They could be an excellent partner because they know that, right? Large corporates know that they're not the best in adapting to new market needs. So they search for channels to get access or get a hold of how to access these kind of markets. So it should be, from a startup perspective, should be treated according to the situation at hand, really. Let's see what the large partner there really wants. But I mean, we won't have a better space startup ecosystem if the big guys are tripling their money to be invested in startups. I don't think that's the path.
You also need to see how small the space sector is. The currently established space sector is a very small industry. Yeah, I mean, if you have a revenue of few €100,000, then you're already in the top 10. A few €100,000, 700 million euros or something, you're in the top 10. Yeah, in Europe. So I think the amounts that the Airbus, OHB, Thales, and so forth can actually invest in this area are somewhat limited. We have to look at the investment beyond that. Yeah. And there are probably companies that might not be as scalable, and they might not see the venture path that Mynaric has been able to embark on. They might move from entrepreneur to being a credible service business, but which might be the great addition and might flourish in a partnership with one of those guys, but also engineering firms like IABG and so forth. So I think it's very credible for these companies to actually go and fish and understand, because there are bound to be a number of teams that will not be scalable or not be sustainable as a standalone service business. And they're kind of fast boats that help a big ship overall to go faster if they get acquired, or at least if they're partnering. That doesn't mean they have to be fully absorbed. So it's definitely also a way to innovate the space industry as such. You see quite a bit of that happening in the US right now. I think there's currently no CubeSat manufacturer totally independent anymore. It's the Lockheed, the Raytheons, and others who have silently or less silently snapped up the players that are there, because they know how to work with the military, how to work with black space, as Spacewatch Global called it this week in one of their talks. And they bring this capability in and they say, okay, let's give enough money to these entrepreneurs so they can do it, because we have the market access and we have the trust also of our customers. I hope that that doesn't happen in Europe to the same extent, but we'll see some of it.
That's some really good feedback there. Maybe since you already mentioned IABG, maybe we can bring Stefan into the game again. So as one of the big and established company within this panel, maybe give us your thoughts about how a big company like IABG can foster entrepreneurship, involve new space actors and startups more, and maybe like also by providing support and access to technologies and all of those things. So especially since Stefan is working with Galileo and navigations, I think the whole ecosystem around Galileo offers a lot of opportunity for startups as well. And I think as one of the more established companies within this segment, you could also foster and encourage entrepreneurial spirits and activities. So I think IABG might have some thoughts on this one.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I followed the interesting discussion, but it was really interesting because I think satellite navigation is complete another world, because for example, compared with SATCOM, so you don't launch a satellite or have a payload and make money out of this. Satellite navigation is available free of charge. So there are billions of receivers out there, and everybody uses the same 30 GPS or Galileo satellites for free. So it's I think, complete different situation. And I think that the whole market of satellite navigation, maybe 10% is related really to the satellite and ground segment market. 20% are receivers and additional augmentation service, and about 70% is applications. And so I think for satellite navigation, it's a little bit more difficult to get access to all these new space technologies, because all the systems are governmental systems. And beside Galileo, every other satellite navigation system is a military system, but are used to 95% by civilian users. But this billions of receivers out there. So I think it's very important for the satellite navigation community not to miss the connection to all these new space activities, because they are driven by startups, small companies who can make out the business in 2 or 3 years directly from a small space-based service. And satellite navigation, the space sector itself is the lowest part, and the applications are the bigger part. So I think it's really a task for the next years to find out clever ways to get also benefits from all these new space developments and transfer it in the world of satellite navigation. So yeah, different. I don't have any concrete ideas how this can happen, because I work in a little niche very related to this public regulated service to Galileo, but maybe Stefan Kupczek, who has a broader view on our other space activities, has more relationship with all these new space technologies.
Yeah, as I mentioned, our focus of IFBG is that we work as a service provider. In this role, we are in a so-called second row. Our task is to give the best service to the system companies, or as well to component manufacturer, instrument manufacturers, and of course as well to, let me say, the so-called new space market. We started, as I mentioned, a couple of years ago with serving universities. Now they have established some companies, some startups out of it. They are still customers from us. We are helping them to qualify their systems, so that they will get a launch possibility, and that, let me say, the operation in space will be as they have planned it. And therefore, we have to adapt, on the one hand side, the processes of qualification, and we have to get new technologies in our facilities, and we can as well use our broad experience for, in particular, for serving customers coming from other branches than the space, so automotive or medicine, or as well military subjects or electronic industry. And because they have completely other philosophies to qualify their products, and I think this will help us to adapt our services as well to the future needs in new space.
I think that's one of the really important aspects that you mentioned, that usually when you're starting a business, you look for funding, but also the getting experienced people or companies involved who can actually support on the technical side of things and more of the professional side of things than just giving funding is also very important. And I think all the existing bigger space companies can definitely play a big role in this one. So that's definitely something very important.
Look, this is as well a matter of price. If you have a small satellite starting from a CubeSat up to maybe a 50 kilo, 100 kilo satellite, you cannot do the qualification campaign as you do it for, let me say, for 2 or 3 or 4 ton satellite, which has to work maybe 15 years, 18 years. Such a qualification test campaign for such a large satellite will afford maybe 1 million, 2 million, maybe more euros. For a small component, or we have customers coming to us with for several testing for a couple of hundred euros. or a small amount of 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 euro for tests and for a small test campaign. So this is what I mean. Of course, we do not follow in these test campaigns for the new space business. We do not follow the ECSS standards. We have a complete other qualification management system, quality management system. This has to be adapted, and this will be adapted and is adapted for those customers. And yeah, then it will, let me say, we have to, as an independent company, I mentioned the company is owned by the employees, so we have no big group behind us. We have to be attractive, and we have to meet exactly the needs of markets and as well of future markets. And this is, let me say, the challenge which we have to we have to be successful as well in the future.
All right, I think that was a very good exchange there on the innovation part, and on the role that big companies can have in terms of propelling the smaller ones forward. I would like maybe to pick into Rainer's head a little bit and ask a question, maybe on the provocative side, let's say, in the sense that we keep hearing that Europe and Germany in particular, that we are very conservative, whereas, for example, in the US, the openness to innovation is a lot more widespread. At the same time, we know that the average age of the German or European investor is quite high, and they are typically white and male, which is also the case for the US. So I would like to know first, whether do you think that there's let's say, a generation gap between the new space, which is fast and agile, and the investor, the typical investor culture, and in a more general sense, what is your view, the role of culture in entrepreneurship?
Okay, let's first tackle the topic of entrepreneurship. I think we've gone a long way. In the last 5 years, I've seen numerous proposals of people proposing a space venture, which is not derived out of space by itself, but derived by a need. 2 fintech entrepreneurs have approached me saying, I'm originally a physicist, I'm originally an aeronautic engineer, I want to do something in space. This is my idea, can I run it by you? Yeah, those are successful entrepreneurs who know how the venture capital game works, and they know what they need to compose their team. Another serial IT entrepreneur is very successful and now a successful small launcher business out of Munich. Yeah? So I think we're seeing a change in culture. We're also seeing increasingly in the investment community people that are way younger than 60. I would say 10 years ago, business angels were over 60 on average. Not all male, I would say, no. But I mean, increasingly, it's a generation of successful entrepreneurs, entrepreneur teams who either create small angel groups, small deal syndicates, or even funds. And they want to invest in something they understand. And typically they're younger than 60 by far. And those and VC managers that turn 60 are thinking about rather retiring rather than doing something more. So I think that hypothesis is somewhat wrong. Now, Europe versus North America, I mean, we're catching up fast, probably not fast enough, but America is seeing that in particular in space, in Europe, there is something to be had, and that people are more affordable. The talent is more affordable, probably deals are more affordable. So in that regard, I think we're on a good path. As I said earlier, I think we need to push more for entrepreneurship earlier in universities, showing it as a perspective that if you really want to work in space, it's not only ESA, DLR, and the big space companies as your avenue, but that you should think about your options at some stage. Going straight out of university, for some people it might be good, but learning a bit of professional tricks and how to behave in the business world cannot harm at times. Yeah. So those are things, I think, the areas we can work most on in Germany right now.
Yeah, and I think it's also true that culture is both ways. So it's not only culture at the investor level, it's culture at the innovation level. So people trying, being brave enough to take steps and to take risks, and it should not just be up to the investors to, let's say, to do this. So I think creators and engineers and people who are actually developing the task, the technologies should also come to the forefront and say, okay, I'm willing to risk it, and maybe I will fail, but at least I will have learned something. So I think the culture of at the base is also changing.
I mean,
that's really true, right? You have to be bold. I mean, that's what I meant earlier, is that we need people that are bold enough to say, no, we build a global market leader in this and that service here. We're not building something small that's where it's fine to have 1 million of revenue 5 years from now. No, we want 100 million, we want 1 billion of revenue per year next year. So don't think small, think big. And there are investors for that. I mean, also investors are seeing increasingly that space as an attractive investment target. I mean, of course, with SpaceX's success, that's getting a lot of momentum. But also, I mean, Richard Branson listed his venture last year. There's more ventures happening, and more visibility on exit paths as well, and more understanding as well of how an investment in space could look like from the investment cycle as well, because it takes a long time, as we said earlier, it takes a long time from first investment until the exit strategy for that investor. It's not all about just the exit strategy for the entrepreneurs. It's also, you have to think about the exit strategy for the investor, right?
All right, so right before we close, let's just do one quick round for each of the panelists. In terms of one of the big elephants in the room of this year, which is obviously the COVID outbreak. And I would like to hear from each of you in 1 or 2 sentences only. How do you think it has affected your business, and how do you think it might have affected the growth of the space industry in Germany in specific? So let's start with Thomas.
That's a very good question. If COVID would not be around, I would have went to many more conferences and stayed less at home. So for us, the main problem was that the funding took a little bit longer, but at the end, it will all work out. What was interesting is that due to Corona, we had to move out of our labs and workshops at the university because it was closed down. So we had to move into a basement and a garage. And now we can say, we are a startup now that started in a garage and then took off. So yeah, and I'm not concerned about the space industry in the coming years. There's other industries where it's much worse. So I think it goes up.
Fair enough.
To space.
All right. Thank you. Stefan.
Yeah, we are glad that the situation had not a dramatic impact or nearly none impact on our daily work. So we managed to continue quite good to continue with the projects and also with new activities. In the PRS world, we have to deal with sensitive information, so there sometimes is a little delay on that. But in principle, I would say 90% of our business are ongoing, and yeah, we can manage this also in the future. So we are glad that we are in a good position that nearly have no impact due to COVID.
All right. So Rainer.
Well, yes, I mean, first and foremost, for our business, we have seen close to non-impact. We have even been involved in some special activity to help mitigate with Galileo, with satellite navigation, helping to mitigate the Corona crisis with Galileo Green Lane application. Year on year, we've probably grown 20%. That's independent of COVID. We have not seen any business breaking down or being significantly delayed. So that's the good news. Luckily, we were prepared to work more digitally, and video conferencing was close to the norm already beforehand. So that's okay. Now, on the wider side of the space business, I would say digitalization has helped also the space business to go away from closed circle conferences, people meeting each other without really discussing business. It's now the new norm that you ask for a meeting and it's a video meeting rather than a call. You can embrace, you can spot on, include other people, and the institutions are willing to play along on those rules and on those habits. And also, I think the institutions have been very fast. ESA has accelerated their paying practices and their contracting practices. So overall, I think it's more oily now, the whole industry. Let's hope it stays this way and we can benefit from it. And obviously, if a conference is done online, more people can get access, and people have to be more to the point. They have to be just more efficient, yeah, and be prepared if they want to get something out of it. And I think in the long run, I think there's also, I think, a good factor for the space industry could be the ESA budgets have been agreed just before, the European Union budget largely as well. So the base stock for the time being is there. How it will be if public spending allows us to spend the same thing in 4 years again is a different question. But mind you, before the last financial crisis, it was very much a similar situation. Budgets had just been agreed and the space sector could be a bit anti-cyclic. So let's hope for the best. And I think let's take the positives out of it.
All right. So it seems like it was the financial crisis, the COVID crisis. Let's hope third time is not the charm for the space business. All right, Sven, your take?
And I mean, what Rainer just said, I think even on the commercial side, we'll see probably net positive effects, because if this current pandemic shows anything, is that we are super reliant on connectivity by now. And again, it comes down to the fact that 4 billion people are not connected to this kind of connectivity. They're not doing video chatting. You can't do that in many parts of the world. You can't do that from an aircraft. You can't do that from a ship today. So if anything, I think this proves the business point of constellations, broadband constellations, which is our market, right? So for us in the long term, I think this is enforcing the point that we need this kind of new connectivity solutions. For us directly, I think COVID-19 is a boundary condition we have to work with, but it's not constraining us overly, and also we haven't seen any customers backing away from their programs or something, because these are long-running programs and they're planning for years. They're not planning for the next 6 months or so. So they're not affected by that. It's something we have to learn to handle, and there's impacts on the supply chain, and you're not meeting in person, and there's quarantine measures needed every once in a while, but it's doable, right? So I think the space sector as a whole has been less badly treated than other sectors we've seen.
All right. So thank you very much for all of your contributions. I think it's been very exciting the past 2 hours. It went by so fast. I could even tell the time going. But so I would like perhaps to wrap up and close the panel. Thank you all very much to all the panelists and to all the keynote speakers who contributed to this session. I think we've learned a lot. So I think we have an idea or a better understanding of what German strengths lies and what perhaps could be done in terms of Germany leading the way within the next decade. I think we've learned about a little bit the role that digitalization and interconnectedness may have in the future of space, the synergies of several technologies and several streams of technologies that will help space be successful. So from the navigation part, all the artificial intelligence. And I think we've also learned from the audience a little bit of their concerns in terms of access to funding, the fact that perhaps language is perceived as a barrier. And we've heard also your views, how in reality, perhaps some of these myths or some of these notions are perhaps no longer so much applicable as investors are becoming more agile, catching up with the new space developments. I think before we close, we would like to give a last opportunity for the audience to participate in our Mentimeter. So I will ask everyone to go again to menti.com to ask our final question. And we would like to know whether the panel discussion has changed your views on starting a business in Germany.
Okay, that's still quite positive right now. That's very encouraging. Oh, now we have one for Cristiano Ronaldo. Oh boy.
But I think this panel then led to some excitement in terms of generating this entrepreneurial mindset, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. But there was a lot of enthusiasm from the panelists, so especially from the startup side, Sven and Thomas. So I think that rubbed off on the participants, and they're also quite interested. So that's pretty good to see.
Yeah, it seems a lot more positive.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So I think we can close this one and wrap up with the final slides we have. So first of all, thanks to all of our panelists once more. This was really valuable insight for us and certainly also for the audience. So thank you very much for spending your Sunday afternoon with us and early evening. And as I said in the beginning, we're not just Louisa and myself doing the moderation today, but we're a big team of 9 young and enthusiastic space nerds. And this is like a small collage of who we are, a mixed team from various nationalities and faces, as you can see. And we've done this work in the whole last year, and especially in the recent weeks, ramping up to these virtual sessions, which was really a lot of work and coordinating things and getting things organized and everything. It was really, really a lot of work. So thank you very much to all of our team for their continued support and input and help and encouragement and excitement also as well, because we're not done yet and we have lots coming up, and we still have our in-person event coming up and scheduled for sometime next year when things hopefully get a bit more manageable. So thanks to the team. And as we already mentioned before, there are some events coming up. So within this week, we have a fireside chat with Kai-Uwe Schrogel, Professor Kai-Uwe Schrogel, powered by OHB. So you definitely don't want to miss this one. Very interesting, especially if you're into space law. And then, as Sven already mentioned, the Careers in Coffee Hour with Mynaric is happening not on Tuesday, but on Thursday. Sorry, there is a typo in there. On Thursday, November 19th at 6 p.m. So grab a beer, grab a coffee, register, and be there for both events. Any parting words, Louisa?
So I think as the final words, I would say that if you want to know more about SGC and you want to interact with us, you can look us up on Flickr, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We are always scouting for volunteers and local event organizers, so do get in touch, do connect, and come be part of our organization, our team, our SGC family. And a final big thank you to all the audience and all the participants today. And we hope to see you. We look forward to having you again on board soon. And I think we wish you now a very good evening to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening. Thanks, Louisa, for supporting and all of your work. And have a good night.